Joe Biden promised the border crisis during his run-up to the 2020 election. First was to turn everyone loose, everyone without exception. Here he is.
How exactly would you detain immigrants, if at all, in a Biden administration?
The way we did when we reformed the system with the DACA, I would not retain them behind bars. They show up. No, here's what they do. They show up. Sometimes you have an ankle bracelet, you set a hearing. We have to surge. We have to surge to the border, to the areas where people are being held. Get rid of all the cages, everybody out of prisons, be in a position where if the most you put on is an ankle bracelet, that you give a date, you're going to show up, and we have to for an immigration hearing, and they show up.
Is that for children, adults and children?
Across the board.
Across the board, everybody, turn them loose. I mean, there really shouldn't be any surprises here, right? Except maybe we didn't pay close enough attention or take him seriously. Maybe we just never thought an open border would look like it does today, but boy, what a disaster. And now we have illegals in our streets committing violent crimes, costing Americans their jobs, and now demanding free stuff, too. That's going on all over the country. Listen to this from Seattle earlier this week.
Seattle City Council disrupted as asylum seekers and their supporters once again pleaded for support. Council President Sarah Nelson saying there are limited resources here.
I don't really want to participate in a conversation that should be had with county leaders, state leaders, federal leaders.
Council ultimately took a break from the meeting in the middle of chants from protesters yelling on behalf of the refugees. At one point, Councilmember Kathy Moore requested that SPD take action.
I request that we have police response. Our physical safety is being threatened by the actions of the demonstrators outside banging on the windows.
Eventually, arrests were made. It's the second time in 2 months that the group from Latin America has called upon Seattle leaders to fund their temporary housing. Refugees have been living in different area hotels, most recently this one in Kent. That stay was funded by Seattle taxpayers. Genesis from Venezuela said she knows this protest wasn't the most correct thing to do, but they've got kids. They feel pressured to act for them.
So here are the illegals in Seattle disrupting the city council meeting, demanding free stuff. We have kids, you know. Well, so do we, and grandkids, and a country we care about. Does anybody see this ending well at all? No, of course not. And Seattle is just one example of the failures that are happening all over America and the very high price we're being forced to pay for the globalists' open border agenda. Laken Riley, of course, killed because of these policies. The beautiful 22-year-old nursing student beaten to death in broad daylight by an animal in our country illegally. Arrested several times and released without any consequences until he finally killed somebody. Until he finally ended a young woman's life in the middle of a major college campus in a sanctuary city in the middle of America. But what about the people getting exploited, hurt, and killed that you never hear about? Those names that you never hear, what about them? Dr. Phil, for example, boy, did he left the women of The View slack-jawed and speechless when he told them point blank, kids are being shipped directly into America and sold directly into sexual slavery. He said this on The View, believe it or not. Here it is.
I talked to the head of all the border guards down there, the head of the union. I asked him straight up, kids are coming over the border with numbers written on them, phone numbers and addresses. Do we check those out? He said, well, we call them. Is it possible that we're sending them into known prostitution rings or sweatshops? He said, it's not possible. It is absolute. We are using American tax dollars to ship children into known prostitution and sweatshops.
Some children?
Well, who knows?
Okay.
We don't know. I said, are you...
So what kind of checking do they do? So
They call the number and say, do you know about this child? They say, yes. Will you receive them when they come? Yes. I said, is it possible that that's a prostitution ring? He said, we know enough to know that in a number of cases, it has turned out to be absolute sex ring. It has turned out to be an absolute sweatshop. I said, how is this possible?
Well, what do they do?
And he said, it is happening.
What do they do then if they know that that's happening? Where is the U.S. Attorney's Office? Where is the...
Damn good question,
you have to re-ask that question when we come back, because we're coming back with more.
Oh, Whoopi didn't want to hear any more of that. Whoa, 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 whoa. That doesn't go with the narrative very well, now does it? Is it possible? No, it's absolute. These children are headed to sexual slavery and prostitution. They want to hear no more about that, because for the Democrats and the people in power, it isn't about being right, it's about destroying the country. And if some kids get hurt along the way, well, so be it. But we don't want to advertise it. As long as it isn't their kids, they don't care. And for the people committing crimes that have come here illegally, there's nothing to worry about, because nothing's ever going to happen to most of them. They can break the law. They get away with it from the moment they arrive, because President Biden is letting them. He's refusing to enforce the law, something he's bound by his oath of office to do. Here he is again from the campaign trail, promising to stop all deportations. We're not going to throw anybody out of the country. If I get elected, here it is.
Nobody, and some of you are going to get mad at me with this, but nobody is going to be deported in my first 100 days until we get through the point that we find out the only rationale for deportation will be whether or not you've committed a felony while in the country.
But drunk driving's fine. You know, drug charges, no big deal. Assault, as long as it can be reduced to not being a felony, you're good to go. And of course, he neglected to mention all the felonies they don't charge, or all the felonies they want to make misdemeanors instead, like I said, drunk driving. Biden also promised the illegals amnesty and all the free health care they could want, paid for, of course, by you.